We wrote a quick Python script to do every single possible possibility, started running it, went to lunch. 3-4 hours later, we had every single password in the system, including system admins who had a backend SQL access and all the different users. And we, got on the phone because it was an externally available web portal. So we got on the phone with the security team, said, guys, this is what's actually a problem. And they said, oh my goodness, we've been fighting with development over this web app portal for so long, but we didn't know how it could be broken. Thank you guys. We can finally get them to change it.
You found an issue. Now, you didn't wait for the 2 or 3 weeks later, hey, here's the report of findings and things. This was so critical. You're like, wait, stop the presses. We need to let you know this is a find. And this is not just a find. This is a critical find. This is something that needs to be addressed ASAP.
Yeah, that's pretty standard practice. Certainly if I do that, but I've not heard of anybody else not doing that if it's a truly critical issue. It's definitely from a penetration testing perspective. If there is a critical find, the industry lets you know as soon as possible.
Hello and welcome to Secrets of AppSec Champions. My name is Chris Lindsay, and today we are speaking with Nathaniel Shere. Today's conversation is going to be around penetration testing. Nathaniel is the Technical Services Director at Craft Compliance. Nathaniel, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Chris. Really excited to be here. So I've been working in penetration testing for a little over 10 years. I've worked both as a consultant doing the penetration tests for various clients, but I've also worked directly with developers as a security engineer, which has given me a really interesting perspective from kind of both sides of the penetration testing process, both doing it and writing the reports, but then also being on the other side and getting the reports and now having to do something with them. So really excited to talk about it.
Awesome. So our conversation today is going to focus on penetration testing. We're going to talk about all aspects of penetration testing. So let's get started. Nat, how did you get started in pen testing? What was that initial aha moment for you that said, hey, pen testing is really kind of fun and enjoyable?
So I got my master's in cybersecurity. That gave me kind of a broad knowledge of the entire field. And then I started out as a consultant with Rook Security, it was at the time. And I was just a general consultant doing all different kinds of projects, whether that was, security tool implementation, there was some policy writing, all kinds of stuff, and penetration testing as well. Well, the team continued to grow to the point that, my manager actually came to us and said, all right, let's specialize you guys a little bit more. Instead of having you all focus on every project, we're going to let you guys focus a little bit on specific projects and get better and better on those specific skills. Now, where do you want to be? And at this point, I'd been able to do a couple of different projects, but it was a no-brainer. Pen testing was absolutely the best projects that I'd worked on. They were the most fun. They were the most exciting. Definitely the reason that I came to work every day going, man, I hope I get another one of those kinds of projects. It was an easy decision for me.
That's awesome. For me, the aha moment was I love breaking things. I love attacking things as a ethical hacker. And it really is just really kind of exciting when you have a find. Somebody comes out and they said, all right, we feel like this is really nice and secure, and have at it. And when you have that chance to go see what you can find, it's really interesting. The things that you can find in the different categories is really, really deep. And so it brings a lot of value into penetration testing. Do you have any fun stories that you can share of some finds that were just like, wow, this is huge?
Oh, absolutely. So for the value of penetration testing, I usually look at it kind of from the two sides. The one side is detecting and identifying where we're vulnerable. And then the other side is responding from it. So maybe we know we know our environment, we're pretty good, but we're not very good at identifying an attack and responding to it. So that's kind of your two sides of the value there. And different times you get value in the different areas. So one time, for example, in the first part of not even knowing what was available, I worked with a client where it was an external network penetration test. The entire environment was fantastic. We were looking at probably potentially a report that was almost blank. And we were really starting to get nervous as consultants. It's good for the client when that happens. But of course, as a consultant, we're thinking, well, what value are we bringing in here? But towards the end of the project, we actually found they had their SMTP email service open externally. So, all right, so that would be, a finding in and of itself. It's like, that's probably not, it's administrative portal. It's probably not the best thing to have open externally. But on a whim, I looked up, I said, you know what? Let me just try it. Standard practice anyway, but none of us expected it to work. Let me try to find the default credentials for this particular email service. It took me about 15 minutes of research, found them, we went and tried them, turned out that they worked. And not only was this the email service for the company, all of the emails funneled into this particular service from anybody within the company. So we were able to review all of the different emails, and from there basically pivot into, oh, so your users are submitting help desk tickets whenever they go on vacation with their username and password, so that I think IT can do some, scrubbing, can do some maintenance on the machine or something like that. So that gave us nearly a dozen user passwords. And from there, it was open season on everything that was externally available. So just that one little thing that they didn't even realize that was still active, that one little thing, suddenly it went from a blank penetration test report to, criticals all across the board.
I'll be honest with you, you're going to find so many of those. And think about how much time did it take you? It didn't take you all that much. You had this within less than a day. And when you start looking at what seems to be a small issue, a small find, hey, it's just an SMTP server, what could go wrong? Right now, what we're talking about is, we're not just talking about a small or SMTP server. We're now talking about the fact that, hey, we were able to get the credentials. Now we're able to find people's credentials. We now figured out how the help desk system works. So now you could, as a hacker, go, okay, look, we know that somebody's on vacation and they're having trouble, and it's credentials that you want access to, but you don't have. So you just put a help desk ticket in. Hey, I'm on vacation. I'm having connectivity issues. Could you please change my password? I have it on my password manager back home. Please change it and send me a link to the email here, or please change it to this temporarily. I promise I'll change it when I get in. And all of a sudden now you're gaining access to things. Or you could say, hey, look, my VPN is down. I'm having VPN issues. And now they're giving you the information to log in as a VPN user to you, not the right person. And you start thinking about how this can snowball into something very serious. And this is just part of a day.
And that is why, from the value of the pen test, I think it's very important also to look at your detection and your monitoring. So that entire scenario, we were able to work with the client and say, okay, here's the dozen or so steps that you probably should have caught, either from alerting or from a monitoring perspective, right? This default account, nobody should be logging in with this account. That's an alert right there.
Right.
Number two, it's coming from an external source that's never logged into your email service. And then number three, now we're snooping around your email service, doing searches for emails with password or secret or anything like that. Again, what IT user, who in your internal users is doing those types of searches? So another opportunity to detect a potentially malicious insider now that we were in your systems.
You bring up a good point. Is as an ethical pen tester, as an ethical company, helping other companies understand where they're vulnerable, not only were you able to provide them, hey, this is what we were able to do and the steps that we were able to do it, but you also provided some experience. Hey, here are multiple steps that you should have caught along the path. So if you're running a SIM, or if you're running some kind of tool that's in the background, like a Splunk, that's running, here are some things that you should be considering as far as your security profile goes, to make sure that if this happens, this should be a never event. You should never be able to log in as this account. And if you do, somebody should be notified.
Which, now that you mentioned it, is one of the other good values of a penetration test. It's kind of that thinking like a hacker perspective. For a lot of development teams, they're in the development mindset of, well, this is how the user is going to use the system. And then a penetration tester comes in and says, sure, or we'll do it this other way. I had one of my clients, they had this external web app with the most unique login experience that I've ever seen. We initially pulled it up, and it was just a grid of, I think it was 4 by 5 images. We couldn't even figure it out at first. But finally, after some experimentation, we figured out if you click on 3 images, you get a little login failed at the top. Well, so all right, so we're using our proxy tools, I think Burp Suite, and figuring out what's going on. Well, it was a simple login. That's all it was. No username and the password essentially was your 3 images. But they weren't even making it complicated and sending the images as your password. In JavaScript, it was translating the images to numbers. So it was a simple 1 through 20, no repeating, 3 numbers. After that
Right.
point, again, we're thinking like hackers now. So, well, that's super easy. There's very few opportunities. There's very few options here for your potential password. Within 30 minutes, we wrote a quick Python script to, you know, do every single possible possibility. Started running it. Went to lunch. 3 4 hours later, we had every single password in the system, including system admins who had a backend SQL access, and all the different users. And we got on the phone because it was an externally available web portal. So we got on the phone with the security team and said, guys, this is what's actually a problem. And they said, it was so funny. They said, oh my goodness, we've been fighting with development over this web app portal for so long, but we didn't know how it could be broken. So thank you guys. We can finally get them to change it.
Well, and you bring up a good point. You found an issue. Now, you didn't wait for the 2 or 3 weeks later. Hey, here's the report of findings and things. This was so critical. You're like, wait, stop the presses. We need to let you know this is a find. And this is not just a find. This is a critical find. This is something that needs to be addressed ASAP.
Yeah, that's pretty standard practice. Certainly, if I do that, but I've not heard of anybody else not doing that if it's a truly critical issue. It's definitely from a penetration testing perspective. If there is a critical find, the industry lets you know as soon as possible. Whether it's phone
Right,
call,
right.
email, sometimes skywriting, like we try to tell you.
Smoke
Yeah,
signals in the wind blowing down. Yes, yes. So, one of my favorite things with pen testing is related to, and again, authentication. And so many companies feel like, we have the authentication figured out, we're in good shape. And, realistically, if you're not doing a multi-factor authentication or some other thing like YubiKey, now you're really kind of opening yourself up to bigger problems. And one of my favorite stories was I was at AWS reInvent, and I had this guy come up to me, and we were just chatting about security. And he goes, who's Med? Yeah. And I explained who we were, what we did. And he said, I don't need tools. I'm a great programmer. Have you heard that before? I'm a great programmer. I don't need security tools. I don't need security. I'm good. My clean code is good enough.
not as explicit as that. I think sometimes it's kind of been the undertone of something said, but that's pretty out there.
Right. So he came over and I said, let me show you my laptop. I had Burp Suite. Burp Suite, for those who are listening, is a penetration testing tool, and it does a fabulous job. There's lots of plugins and things that you can do. So if you want to have some fun, that's a great way to get involved, is through the community edition and so on. So I created 2 accounts on his system, and then I proceeded to steal data from one account to the other. Looking at the data, I was able to look at the request and response, and I knew based off the request and response how he was doing things under the covers. And just the look on his face when I stole data from one account to another that I created, and then my comment to him describing the fact that I can now enumerate all his data because of how he did it, he was just in shock. And these are some of just the beginning things that you can think about from a security standpoint that penetration testing does for you. The value that you get out of this is the ability to say, look, we feel like we have something solid. Please go test it and see what you can find. And these are simple finds. This is not a advanced type level find that I had. This is really almost a beginner level, an entry level. And so when you come and tell me that you write clean code, that's great. I'm glad you can read it at 3 a.m. if you have to wake up in the middle of the night and make changes or fix something. But the reality is, if you're not writing secure code, and that's where, again, the multi-factor authentication really pays dividends, is because now not only can I break in, well, I can't, because I may have the right stuff. And you learn from working with your penetration tester, look, a 24 expiration on a JWT token is not wise. Consider something a little bit smarter, and rotating keys and things of that nature. So there's so much value that comes out of penetration testing.
On that note, it is a common problem in the industry that we talk about all these sorts of issues. And we tell these stories about, well, this developer made this mistake and this developer made that mistake. And it very often comes off as we're putting down the developers and everything. And that's never, well, it's rarely the case, I should say. Because I've done little scripts, right? Python little scripts help me to do some different exploits and different attacks. I'm not a developer in the slightest. I can read source code. I could not write a large program. I've worked with the developers. They're far beyond me. A lot of their technical skills are just very, very impressive. They understand development. They understand how to build the application. They understand how to make all of the different pieces work. What they're not always as aware of, because we all have, finite amount of time. We can only learn so many things. What they're not always aware of is those security issues, especially some of the common ones. Either they're relying on the framework, they're relying on other security tools. They think it's taken care of. They don't have to worry about it. And again, they're in that kind of mindset of this is how the user uses it. They're not thinking like, how can it be abused if somebody were to take advantage of some of the kind of inherent trust things that you're assuming between your users and those sorts of things. Like the enumerating data is a very common one. A developer will put an ID or something in the URL and not ever think about, oh, well, what if the user comes in and changes that ID to the next number or to the 100 numbers, or just sequence them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They don't think like that because they think, well, you click on the link. I gave you the link. You click the link, and that's it. That's all you're doing. The number is in the link. I know I have talked to a number of developers who say, we handle that in JavaScript under the hood. The user never sees it. It's true, but it's in the user's browser. Mm-hmm. So if the user wanted to see it, they could. And that is where, as you mentioned, Burp Suite, that's a fantastic tool, mostly for web applications. But it does come in and makes all of that stuff very, very visible, so that you can test it kind of outside of those JavaScript controls and all that sort of stuff. So.
Right. And another favorite thing I enjoy doing with penetration testing is going in there and, if you have a field that takes 15 characters, let's say it's a phone number, it's a first name that's 20 characters, and you just go blast it with 4,000 characters. It's always fun to see, how forward thinking is your development team? Are they putting the correct error handling in place? And if you do error handling in place, what are you returning back to the user? Because sometimes you return back stack traces without realizing it, which then gives the penetration tester, hey, guess what? They're using this library, they're doing these things, and they have so much visibility. One additional thing that I think is really, that I want to bring up related to penetration testing is the fact that some of the tools like Burp Suite have plugins that show you what libraries you're actually utilizing for your web. And not only what libraries, but it also gives you the details that you need behind it to go attack it. And so, it's important to have, stay current on your dependencies. If you're staying current on the dependencies, that helps negate any of those finds. And so it's just real easy to find those. Let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about what kind of things make it easier for you to do your job when penetration testing. For example, what kind of environment should they set up? Should you go against their production? Should you go against a mimicked pseudo production environment? Should they give you what kind of access levels and what kind of details should they give you for you to be successful in helping them?
So the environment is definitely a big question. I prefer personally staging environments, test environments, because it makes me a lot less concerned about causing any data problems. I can run, tools and scanners kind of at max speed without worrying about taking the whole environment down, those sorts of things. Now, that being said, the environment does have to match production. I have definitely had a couple of cases where either I will make a finding or I will miss a finding, and we'll kind of huddle together afterwards with the client and say, well, why was this found or why wasn't it found? And it turns out, oh, well, the staging environment was different than the production environment. So, well, if it's different at all, then you might as well do production, because that's where the real risk is going to be. I caveat that slightly that if your staging environment is open externally to the internet, which I have also seen a few times, well, then you might as well test both and then verify as much as you can that they are the same. But generally, yes, you want to test the production risk, and if you're able to have an environment that exactly mimics production that you can test without affecting production, that is ideal. But otherwise, yeah, I would recommend testing production. In terms of access, fortunately, I think the trend here is moving in the right direction, where companies are starting to trust pen testers a lot more. There's kind of the different boxes. You've probably heard of these concepts, right? White box versus black box versus gray box. That's kind of the level of access that you're given. So black box is truly, I don't have credentials, I don't know the software, I'm essentially given a URL and told go. Whereas white box, you're more as a kind of an internal employee. You're given potentially source code, application architecture, certainly credentials to the application, so you can log in as a user and all those sorts of things, and go from there. And your testing methodology is going to be different. So if you have a white box environment, if you have a white box access, of course, then you are able to skip a lot of those enumeration attacks, right? I don't need to enumerate the different libraries that you have if I can just go check the source code and see, oh, here's the list, right? So that saves some time then. And as a result, I think white box testing, which is the trend, I think moving in that direction for pen testing, it gives you a lot more focused, efficient testing. Because as black box, you're kind of hitting your head against the wall, trying to see what might be there. And with white box, you can just go. And so, for example, with white box, if I trigger a potential SQL as well, so if I trigger a potential SQL injection by triggering a SQL error, or if I think I'm seeing the patterns of this might be triggering something in the back end, but like you said, it's not returning that stack trace. It's not returning enough information to me in the browser to really determine what's going on. Well, I could just start like SQL map or a SQL injection tool and hope, or I can do my manual testing and hope. Or if I have that source code access, I can go to the source code, find the relevant section, and just look at the code. I had this actually with a client at one point. They did give me source code access. And so I was able to I found SQL injection. I found, I was getting the errors, is definitely vulnerable. I was doing the different, putting in a single quote and it triggers an error. I put in 2 single quotes, the error goes away. All the classic signs of SQL injection, but nothing I did worked. I could not exfiltrate any data. I couldn't insert any commands. Nothing was working. So I was able to go to the source code and find the SQL query that was affected. As it turned out, it was I think, nearly 300-line SQL query with the user inputs being inputted in several different places, to the point that, and I'm, like I said, right, developers, very technical. There are areas where I'm not as technical as them. I was looking at this and going, I would have to be a DBA to understand what in the world is going on here. I was completely lost in the query. Looking even at the query sections that I was injecting, it was an absolute mess. I finally, called them up and said, hey, there's SQL injection here, but I will be fully transparent with you. I am not nearly technical enough on SQL query syntax to understand how to exploit this. I'm putting medium risk in the report because yes, it's SQL injection, but good Lord, the complexity of trying to exploit this to do anything meaningful, I think would take insider knowledge and potentially a PhD in databases.
No, and really what you're bringing up is a good point too. And that is, as a pen tester, in creating the reports, their environment, where things are running. If you have command injection, add a command prompt or terminal execution where you have to be at the terminal, it doesn't mean anything because you're already compromised. You're already on the box. You're already doing something at that point. So, that's part of how it should run. Versus if it's web-based, then that's absolutely a lot more critical and more serious of a problem. And you bring up a lot of great information talking about the black box, the gray box, the white box methodologies around penetration testing. I want to share a fun story that I did over the summer for interns. So I had interns when I ran my program, and they would come in, and instead of giving them, hey, go do the reports, so go sit in the corner and have a good summer, what I did is I ran my SaaS tool and I created a report. And so we took it and we asked the question, can I do something with the source code? Looking at source code, is there something that I can do? Then the next thing was, let's go pen test it. Can I actually go actually exploit this? Again, this is a lot of the benefits that penetration testing gives, and it's very helpful. So let's talk about sharing the findings with developers. You kind of started alluding to sharing this. One of the benefits of penetration testing is, when you send something over to a developer, should you record the actual attack so that they could look at it, know exactly what you did, and try to reproduce it themselves to fix it?
100%. 100%. I think having worked with developers for a few years, one of their biggest struggles is getting just sent a vulnerability scan report. Hundreds of pages, a lot of technical security details and syntax that they're not necessarily familiar with offhand. Um, and sure, developers are very smart technical people. Could they sit down for a day or two and figure it all out? 100%. Do they have time? Do they have time for that? Not in the slightest. Right? And developer managers even less so. So as a pen test, what you're able to do is take that huge list of just raw vulnerabilities and say, okay, here's the priorities, right? Here are the ones that actually get access to something. Here's the ones that can exfiltrate data. Here's the ones that you can jump from one client to another client or something like that. And then here are the other ones that, yeah, if you have time, this will mitigate some risk as well. Right? But we understand if you prioritize those a little bit lower, right? Maybe you fix these things, you work on those features that your biggest client wanted, right? Or they were pulling out of their contract. And then you come back to some of the lower risk items and those sorts of things. So yeah, developer managers, they want to know this is a huge priority. This needs to get worked on even before all of these features and my own bug reports and all those sorts of things that I support tickets, all those sorts of things, right? Before I work on some of those.
So you're right. It absolutely helps you with prioritization and making sure, because if it's something critical that can be exploited with a unauthenticated, like at the login page, absolutely critical. You need to do something about it. And as you go deeper in the application, and if you require authentication and you do have role-based access implemented properly in your application, then now all of a sudden it really just takes certain aspects and certain things, and you have to kind of really almost stack different things on each other to be able to get to the point of exploration. So
I've had numerous reports where I've had numerous clients where I've done the same pen test, year after year, and very often 70-80% of the findings are repeats year to year. But I don't think I've ever had a client where I called them up and said, "Hey, this is a critical issue that needs to get fixed," that it wasn't fixed by the end of the project.
it's the value that pen testing brings. I mean, because really it's about securing your application, making sure data is not stolen or able to be taken, to be able to protect your inside your network, your east, west, north, south, all of that. The value is massive. So, another question, I'm a strong believer that everybody should always have an external pen test, no matter what. And the reason why is because, when you're coming in, you have no skin in the game. Your job is truly to come in and see what you can find and what you can do. You're not worried about the political environment. You're not worried about how the developer relationship with the project management, with the executives, the board of directors. You're not worried about that. You're really worried about, can I find something? And here it is. One thing you should probably consider, and larger companies absolutely should probably have somebody on staff that is a pen tester, because you have so many applications that are going on internally. You have different things, and really you're going to be able to know, hey, this is an external web, this is external facing, this should be looked at, versus something that's internal. So you as a pen tester can prioritize your own internals. But the other thing too is, as a pen tester internal, you're limited to the scope of what you guys have within your environment, whereas an external pen tester is exposed to so many different applications, and they're always staying current. And having that external resource come in, will help the internal pen tester. Hey, internal guy, you missed X, Y, and Z. Here's how I exploited it. Here's what I have. or vice versa as an internal. Hey, I had access to the source code. I have had a lot more time to review this. Here's something that was missed, and really it's a iron sharpens iron
For sure,
approach.
for sure. And I think again, it's kind of an industry standard, but at least it's the way I think it is. It's at least the way I've always done it. Is that when we finish the pen test, we issue what we call a draft report. And then sometimes we have to work with certain clients. We say, well, this is a draft. Let us know if you have any questions, any clarifications that need. And they come back with, well, this and vulnerability, that's a false positive. You don't need, you can just take those out. Was it, what's that? That's not how it works. But what we want to do is, it might come back with, oh, see, we found SQL injection. It's a high risk. We put in the report as a high risk. They come back and the client comes back and says, hey, we appreciate you finding this. But as it stands, you would have to be an admin in order to even get to this particular endpoint. We only have 3 admins, and they're all, our IT managers. All of the accounts have MFA, and that database actually doesn't even have all that much interesting data anyway. It's all public information, for example. So we might come in and say, okay, right, it's at a raw vulnerability perspective, it is a high risk. There are mitigating controls in place. So for the report perspective, it comes down to a medium or even a low potentially. Usually not for SQL injection down to a low, but that's the point, right? That's the sort of like iron sharpens iron, like that sort of feedback that we're able to work with the client in order to understand. Okay, this is your true risk in your environment, not just this is the industry standard CVSS score. Now good luck, go figure out your prioritization. We want to have those conversations to actually get to the true prioritizations of what needs fixed.
Yeah. Is that also where you go, hey, by the way, your SMTP server was exposed, so I already have all your username and passwords. Here you go. I was able to get in there. Let me ask you this. What is the best advice that somebody has ever given you?
Honestly, the best advice I ever got was after a client install was going horribly wrong. So this was just before a holiday break. This was 4 o'clock. I was trying to get out to catch the bus on a Friday. I needed to get out by 5. 4 o'clock, I'm doing this huge, install of security controls and security software. The one that I was currently on was a process whitelisting tool, which is a great thing for catching malware, catching those sorts of things. If you have a fairly standard non-changing environment, you can put that sort of tool on. Any new process would get stopped and potentially alerted, and those sorts of things. What I was told by our development team was that the tool was in watch mode. It should just collect the information of what processes are running. Unfortunately, that was not right. It was actually in block mode, but the database was empty. So as I installed it on all of our clients' critical servers, it shut down every single process. And I was getting blue screened left and right. It was an hour before I wanted to go home for a holiday weekend. And I was absolutely panicking. I was trying to email, I was trying to get a hold of our development team, I was trying to get a hold of the client. And my manager came around, could see that I was just completely white faced and panicking. And he said, buddy, relax. It's just a job. Which to me, that was the best advice I'd ever gotten. Because in security, there's so much you have to learn. There's so much advice that's constantly being flown around you, whether certifications, whether it's this one, that one, go for this job, go for this field, all this sort of stuff. There's a lot of stress, right? Because it's your client's data. There's this constant feeling of I need to stay up to date on every single piece of information. I need to stay ahead of attackers. I need to fix everything right away. Otherwise, somebody's going to hack it. And sometimes you need to just take a step back and go, relax. You'll do what you can. There's only 24 hours in a day. You also need to sleep and eat. You also need to see your family. And at the end of the
Yes.
day, it is just a job. So as much as we love security, as much as we love, securing and learning and hacking and all those sorts of things, sometimes you do need a break.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And on the other side, what's the worst advice you were given?
I don't think I've ever just been given horrible, horrible advice. What I'm thinking of for this is less something specific that was set and more of the culture, I think, around certifications. I think certifications are a wonderful thing in their time and place. But as an industry, I think we've exploded on certifications, where if you don't have 10 certifications by the time you turn 30, you're considered a wash, which seems very, very silly. I've actually had number of students reach out to me on LinkedIn saying, what certification should I be going for right now? And I said, you're in school. You're literally studying this stuff anyway. Go do well in your classes. Go get your bachelor's. Go get your master's if that's what you're going for, right? That is you don't need to worry about certifications. You're studying the material. This is what you should be doing.
Exactly. You know, for me, I am in full agreement. Certifications are blown out of proportion, and especially, unfortunately, I hate to say the CISSP, because in the old days you had to be on the job for 5 years before you could even sit to take it. And now they're telling people, look, you were in college 4 years, that qualifies. You just need 1 year, and the experience you get, it watered it down. But the thing that I like about certifications, my biggest takeaway that I love, is the fact that a certification will expose you to different aspects of security that you may not be normally in. Your lane may be, like a CISSP. It gives you visibility into a lot of things that you'll never probably need to know or be in again. But to your point, when you're in college, that's what you're already doing. You're being exposed to all the stuff. And as a developer certification, I have multiple there. And it was funny because I was taking one of my Microsoft certified professional ones, and I was studying, and I'm like, why do I keep missing this? And the funny part was, is I was doing the same thing, but I learned how to do it the advanced way and not the entry level way. And the certification was just looking for the entry level way. And I'm like, what? I would never do that. But on the flip side, it was there, and it helped me grow. This has been an amazing conversation. I appreciate the time that you were able to take away and talk to me about this. And I appreciate it.
No, thanks so much, Chris.
All righty. Thank you so much. And for everybody watching, you have a good rest of the day. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today on Secrets of AppSec Champions. If you found today's information valuable, hit that subscribe button on your Apple Podcast, your Spotify, or wherever you're listening to today's episode. Ratings and reviews are like gold for us, so if you're feeling generous, please leave us a kind word, as it helps others find our show. Until next time, take care.